Welcome to the Dave Palma Show, the podcast that revives, restores, and awakens your innermost capabilities.
You have the training and the talent to succeed, but do you have the guts to fail?
I love what I do. When you love what you do, you want to be the best at it.
Today is about the power of you. You will change the world.
Find your path to success through the journey of those who have succeeded. And now, your host, Dave Palma.
Hi, welcome back to the Dave Palma Show. And in this episode, I have someone who is a leadership veteran with more than 28 years of a highly engaged and practical experience. Through successful leadership positions of increasing scope, ranging from the US Marine Corps infantry to C-suite executive, my guest today is constantly increasing his knowledge and experience as a leadership practitioner. Michael Tanner, welcome to the Dave Palma Show.
Dave, thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate this opportunity.
Oh, pleasure to have you here as well. Leadership is one of my big topics. I normally talk about, overcoming adversity, obstacles, teamwork, and things like that. All add together to great leadership and good leadership as well. So, that's why I like it. I was just curious before I start off with my main question of what you do. Was you in the military before or something, or?
I was actually. So here in the States, it's very typical for someone as they're graduating from high school to go right into college, which I did that. But I was invited to leave college. And I was invited to leave college because my grades just weren't there after the first the first year. And that was really because I lacked the maturity and the discipline necessary to, take it to the next level and do the necessary work and the studies to make it in college. And so I was at that point kind of left with, well, what do I do now? And the military really looked interesting to me. And so that's when I decided, well, I'll go into the Marine Corps. I spent 4 years in the Marine Corps. And that's kind of where, obviously, I learned the maturity and the discipline that I needed, but also learned that there had to be a better way to make a living than inside the military. And so that gave me the discipline and drive necessary to get out of the Marine Corps, and went back to college and finished my degree there. And then later on, went into a master's degree program as well.
Oh, wow. And what was that master's degree about?
So my bachelor's degree is in computer science, and then my master's degree is in leadership.
Right, excellent. Well, I see you're going to now have your own company totally dealing with leadership, and it's more about measuring it and things like that. So how do you measure leadership effectiveness? Yeah,
so I am, I've been in leadership now. I say that my first professional leadership position was in 1993, so 28 or so years now, I've been in professional leadership of some sort. And really throughout that journey, I got to a point where I really wanted to teach and to coach more leaders. And I didn't want to be kind of restricted by those that I was leading in the corporate world in my day job, if you will. So that's the reason I started a leadership development firm. And as I was starting that, I came across two really, really important questions that I felt like a lot of businesses and a lot of customers were really struggling with. And the first question was a simple one, well, what does leadership even mean to you, right? How do you define leadership? And when you ask that question, you get all sorts of answers. If you just Google what is leadership, you'll get all sorts of answers to that.
That's right, exactly.
And all of those definitions, they have a lot of kind of ambiguity to them, a lot of touchy-feely type of language to them.
Yeah, that's right. It depends on who it's aimed at and who's writing it and stuff like that. And like yourself, I mean, I come from fire service, firefighting background.
Right.
It's, it's different kind of leadership to, I don't know, some kind of more touchy-feely kind of, arty kind of place, the leadership of that,
Yes,
so.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I would even get, responses like, well, I don't know, but I just know it when I see it. And I think, well, that doesn't help me any. I mean, how do I know what leadership is? But that also leads to the second question, which I think is very, very important and equally difficult to answer, and that is, well, then how do you measure leadership effectiveness, right? So first of all, what does it mean to you? And then, well, how do you measure it? Because I'm a firm believer. I believe it was Peter Drucker that first said, what gets measured gets improved. Yeah. And so that's at the Credible Leadership Group. That's one of the things that we want to help our clients do, is define good, clear definition of leadership, measure their leadership, and then we can improve their leadership.
Right. Okay. Excellent. So again, I mean, really, I'd like to know how you measure it. I know we're going to talk about you do have a calculator. I know that. But,
we do. Yes.
Yeah. Let's get more into the background of leadership and measurement and stuff like that. Just to kind of spell out to someone who's a complete novice at all this stuff, really.
Well, I think to answer that, we have to start with some of the answers that I would receive when I ask the question, well, how do you measure leadership? Sometimes, again, those answers were really ambiguous. They really didn't have any kind of objective measurement to them, right? It was really subjective, how leaders feel about what's going on, how people feel about the culture of their team, and so forth.
Yeah, that's right.
And other answers, I mean, where they are rather objective, I think they're really the wrong metrics to be using for measuring leadership effectiveness. So two common objective answers I get to the question is attrition, right? If attrition is high, then we know we have a leadership problem. I think there's a statement or a quote out there that says, people don't leave jobs, they leave bad leaders or bad bosses. And so companies will say, well, attrition is how we measure bad leadership, right? And my response to that is, well, that's too late, right? That's like looking at the scoreboard at the end of a soccer game, because at the end of the soccer game, it's too late. You can't change the score now. And if you're looking at attrition, if you're looking at attrition, your good team members have already left. Yeah, and so it's kind of already too late to be measuring leadership at that point.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Well, so what we've done is we've tried to create an effective way to measure leadership in a very objective way. And so being a computer science background and a math background, I had to develop an equation. I had to develop a formula. And in this formula, we put together the 4 components of leadership that we teach, and I'll tell you what the 4 are, and we can dive into any of those that you'd like. But
well, we could elaborate once we go into them. Yeah,
correct. Yeah. So
say what they are first, and then we can elaborate on each one.
Right. And so I'll describe the equation for you quickly. First, we have credibility. That is kind of your track record of success, and then that's added to competence. So competence is your skill set or your knowledge. That sum, competence plus credibility, is then divided by your motive. And this is the answer to the question, why do you want to be a leader? And it really comes down to, are your motives selfish or are they selfless? Right? And then finally, that total sum and divided by motive is then multiplied by relationship. And relationship is this idea of this level of relationship that you have with those that you're leading on a personal level, not just a team member and what they're doing, for your team, but how well do you know that person as a person? Right? So that's the 4 components and the makeup of the equation.
Right. Okay. It was quite interesting you dividing it with motivation. What does that dividing do? Why would you do that?
Well, it's a divisor in the equation because your motive, and again, motive is your reason for being a leader. It's a divisor in the equation because it can greatly reduce your leadership effectiveness. And again, motive is kind of related to this perception that your team members have for you. And your team members are always questioning your motives for being a leader. And your score is impacted by how much do they perceive your motives to be selfish, right? So if you make a decision and your team members are asking themselves, right? Our mind just kind of naturally asks ourselves, why did he make that decision? And if your team members believe the answer to that question that they're asking in their mind is in some way selfish, then your leadership effectiveness is going to be greatly diminished, right? If they believe that you're making that decision because you want the credit for the decision, or because you want to go to the board and earn praise from the board for yourself, and so they see those as selfish motives, and because that number is going to be high in the denominator, then it's going to bring your score way down, right?
Right, I can understand that now. Yeah, I know in some offices when I was working in the fire department, used to just do certain things to, chalk off, this will get me promotion and get me up there, and things like that. I don't care if I get this person in trouble or do this and it's going to upset everyone. I don't care about them. I'm just going to move up, This is just a stepping stone for me, that kind of thing. It's a selfish kind of way, whereas others really care about the guy. They're not really, worried about, they probably would like promotion, but will do it through credibility, if you like, and,
yes.
But still care about what they're doing on the ground,
Yeah, I see that all the time. And I would, I try to kind of correct people and say that, well, that's not leadership. Someone may earn a promotion and they may be, quote, the boss, or in the organizational chart, they may be in a position of authority over me, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're a leader, right? In our definition, leadership has nothing to do with title or position or rank or any of those things. Leadership is really about influencing other people, and influencing other people has with it this idea of a willingness to follow, right? So they're willingly following you. That's leadership. They're not leading you because they fear that you're the boss and you could fire them or something like that. They're following you because they want to follow you. And that just doesn't happen when they believe that your motives for being a leader are in some way selfish, right? If you're in it for your own good and not the good of the team, then you're not going to get this willingness to follow you as a leader.
Yeah. And I suppose the leadership in sports, because obviously I did track, but let's say NBA, just for argument's sake, because that does involve leadership, or NFL. But I know more about basketball because that's a more global sport.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, I can do basketball. I love it.
Yeah. Oh, there you go. So I mean, that also, the basketball players also can go against the leader. Same with soccer. It's a big sport here, and the manager might not be doing very well, and they would more or less get the sack. There's no promotion as such, because that's the ultimate position. I mean, you can't be the chairman unless you've got money and you buy the kind of club. So. Yeah, that's a different type of motive there, isn't it, really? What kind of motive would you say is wrong and right in that situation?
Yeah, no, I love that example. And, one of my favorite examples actually is collegiate basketball, right? I like the NBA too, but collegiate basketball I think is really important because you only have those players if you're the coach, you only have those players on your team for 3, maybe 4 years. But what I like about, the example of collegiate basketball is, you have these press conferences after a basketball game, and the coach is up there and he's answering these questions from the media. And if you'll just watch the language from some of these coaches, you can definitely tell the difference between the coaches that are really, really successful and those that aren't quite as successful. If you'll listen to the language of a coach that's really successful, you will hear them talk about how much they care about the players. Sometimes you'll even hear them use language like how much they love an individual player or a particular person or whatever, right? And so you'll hear the care that coach has for his players. And when that's the case, then he's going to get the very best effort from those players, right? When they're on the basketball court practicing and no one is watching, he's still going to get the very best effort from them because they know he cares about them. But on the other hand, if you have a coach that, is maybe just blaming all of the turnovers or the loss or whatever, and they're blaming it on circumstances, or maybe they're even criticizing a team member or something like that, and they're not showing any kind of concern or care for the team members. Well, again, inside that basketball practice where no one is watching, at best, they're getting a half-hearted effort from those team members during that practice. And so that's in my opinion, that's really what demonstrates for you the difference between a successful team and a successful coach is that motive, that the motive is there for, it's a selfless motive and it's there for the team, not themselves as a coach.
Yeah, that'll probably reflect more on collegiate because with the professional level, you know, the team's there longer, so it's more money and, you know, or the status. Are they there for the status of being a manager? They don't care about the player, or are they there because they care about the player and they don't care about the money, or that they're, you know, there for this big team. They don't mind if they, you know, have to go to a smaller team or whatever, you know.
Right. Yeah, I know it's not necessarily a leadership principle here, but it's one of the reasons that I really like collegiate sports over professional sports, because I just feel like the professional sports, they're there for the money. Whereas in college, they're there to play the game. You know, they just want to play the game. Yeah. So anyway.
No. I mean, doing track, you know, that's very collegiate, and
correct.
You know, there's not as much money in that as there is in, you know, for a club sport. That's right. You know, as there is in professional. You know, the professionals there, you have to be a gold medalist or a world record beater to get the same kind of money as a top NBA player. That's
right.
You know. So, but yeah, no. And also, we can look at, I mean, obviously recently in the news, I mean, we're going into the corporate world, you know, leadership tends to be like with Facebook, what they went through just now with, you know, this allegations of how toxic it is, you know, and you know, Amazon as well, you know, that kind of thing, because the tech industry is probably huge, especially since the pandemic, but even before it, you could see it's going to be the future of, you know. So, I mean, where would you put that kind of leadership? Because that is really going straight to Jeff Bezos or Facebook. What's his name?
Mark Zuckerberg.
Yeah, Zuckerberg. You know, they're the names of the leaders. You don't hear about anyone else, do you? So they're not going anywhere. What would you say in terms of your calculations? A calculator would measure their leadership. Because here's the thing. First, before you carry on.
Yeah, sure.
Immediately after the lady went to, you know, to sort of expose them about how toxic, you know, Facebook is, he's gone and announced that he's now going to do what Google's done, is actually got a parent company called Alphabet. I forgot his one, Meta or something. And that's kind of fishy to me, isn't it?
Yeah. No, I totally agree with you. And you see this happen, especially with some of these popular brands. I mean, you saw it a little bit with Apple, and you started hearing about, you know, the kind of tyrant, if you will, that Steve Jobs was. And you hear the same thing about Facebook and Google and so forth. And, you know, in my opinion, what's happening there is the motive for those leaders is shifting from the team, the people, and shifting to the product or the business, right? So the motive is all about, you know, hitting the schedule or getting the next product out, or, you know, or maintaining the company brand or something like that. And listen, I don't argue that those things aren't important, right? I'm all for pushing for deadlines and being aggressive with our work and productive and all that. But you can just feel the motivation changing for leaders when it changes from their care and their concern is about the team members that's making all of those, you know, things happen, making all of that success, and the leader instead kind of shifts and their motive becomes all about the company or the product or the brand, or maybe even themselves. And when that happens, then your leadership score is going to go down. So your effectiveness as a leader is going to go down, meaning you're not getting that willing followership, right? And when that's the case, again, your team members, they're giving you a half-hearted effort. And so now you might need 200 people to do the job of 150 that you had in the past or something like that. So, you know, from a corporate standpoint, your productivity is going to start going down and things like that.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, I mean, that's usually the case, really, is, you know, that can happen. But obviously, you know, I mean, Amazon's a billion dollar, you know, kind of company. Facebook, you know, it's got enough money to kind of, you know, be still staying up there, you know.
That's right. Well, and that's the luxury they have, is they are large enough that these, these impacts, these negative impacts to their leadership is less obvious, right? But if you take a smaller team, a smaller business, then a small reduction in the leadership effectiveness is going to be very, very evident and very clear. So you're exactly right. Very large companies like the ones we've just mentioned, this lack of leadership is less obvious than it would be anywhere else.
Yeah. Wow. So let's I think you did talk about the actual 4 components.
Yes. Credibility, competence, motive, and relationship.
Yeah. So let's move on to your calculator and talk more about that, and then we can see how people can sort of get on board with it, really. So tell us more about the calculator, leadership calculator.
So given that we have an equation, then we wanted to give people an easy way to calculate, to use the equation to calculate a score. And again, one of the things that I like about this equation and a calculator is that it gives you a very objective number, right? We just, as humans, we tend to be defensive when a measurement of us is in some way subjective, right? If you say to me, well, I feel like you weren't being honest in that situation, well, now I'm all defensive, right?
Yeah.
But if you've got some objective data or information that tells me that I was being dishonest, now my defenses are down, if you will, and I'm more open to receiving that information and making the changes necessary based upon it. So given that, we wanted to give people a very objective way to take a survey. It's built on a survey, and then your responses to that survey puts your responses in the equation, and then that gives you a number. And again, it's an objective number, and the intention there is it's a baseline, right? So it's a baseline number, and now you can go and start to work on your credibility or your competence or your motives or your relationships. And as you do that, as you work on those components, you can now watch your leadership score go up, right, and increase. And one of the most important parts of this calculator, we offer it to leaders, so I could take it for myself. But the real power in this calculator is that I send it to those that I'm leading and get their perception of my leadership. That's where the real power is. And so we offer that in the calculator for you to send it to your team, and they will take the assessment anonymously, and then you'll get their scores back. And now you've got a really good, clear picture of your leadership effectiveness.
All right. Okay. And I mean, this doesn't have to be like a structured organization or, corporate or, like military, frontline emergency services or anything. It's also in the home, it's amongst groups and things like that, in the communities. Can it be used there as well?
Oh, absolutely. And in fact, one of the things that we recommend is, so if you're leading a team, then we definitely recommend that if you're in a corporate world leading a team, we recommend that you send the calculator to those that you're leading, but we also recommend you send it to your peers, other departments that you might be working in, and so forth. Because really, your leadership effectiveness is all based on the perception that other people have of your leadership. I'm sometimes as blunt as to say, it doesn't really matter what you think of your leadership. It really only matters what those that you're leading or other people think about your leadership. So it can be used in the family. It can, it is not org chart dependent at all.
Okay, great. Well, I mean, how can people get hold of this tool? And I mean, where can they find it?
Yeah, sure. So it's a free tool that we offer on our website. So you can find it at credibleleaders.com. Right at the top, there's a button to use the calculator. And again, it's a free tool. You will use it for yourself. And again, it'll give you a score. It'll give you a report on how to improve your leadership effectiveness. But then it's going to also then give you the opportunity to forward that calculator onto your team or your peers or whomever you want to share that with. And again, if you'll take that step, I acknowledge that's a really, really scary step for leaders to take, to send this to other people and ask the question, what do you think of my leadership? But it's really important that you do that. But yeah, just head over to credibleleaders.com.
A good leader wouldn't mind doing that, though.
Agree. Totally agree.
If you know your leadership's going wrong, or that this, you don't want that because you didn't care about them, and it's I don't know about that. I don't really care about them, and they're I'm going to have to be selfless and do this, So,
yes.
But I'm sure it's going to help them if they realise this calculator actually will help them excel more. Especially if things are going wrong for the bad leader.
Yes. Yeah. And that's a really good point, because taking utilizing the calculator and giving the calculator to your team members, it's going to give you a number. And as I said earlier, that's just a baseline number. It's really the improvement that you can make that should be important to you, not what that original or initial score is. And in fact, a lot of people will make the mistake of trying to compare the number to an academic scale, 0 to 100. And, if I get into the 90s, then that means I'm an A. But the math doesn't calculate that way at all. And so really, again, objectively, it just gives you a number, and that's your starting point. And again, you can work on these 4 components of leadership, and you can see that number grow. So that's what's important. You're not being graded, if you will. You're just being assessed as to where you are right now and how much further you can get in your leadership effectiveness.
Fantastic. Well, once again, I will put this website to the free content, the free calculator, credibleleaders.com, on the show notes, so anyone can refer to it once they've listened to this show. And it's been really, obviously I was intrigued by what this calculator is, because I know obviously with coaching for me, I use an assessment tool. It's kind of like an assessment tool, isn't it?
Sure.
Really? So very quick one as well, which is useful. You could use it again and again, can't you? Really see where you're at and stuff like that. So
absolutely.
Yeah, it's very interesting to find out, and I've learned a lot from it myself. Actually, it makes sense. And thanks a lot for coming on the show and sharing this with my audience today.
Yeah, Dave, thanks so much again for having me. A real honor to serve your audience in this way.
That's all for this episode. Thanks for listening, and remember, if you want to support what we do, then share, subscribe, and leave a review over on Apple Podcasts, or head over to my website, davepalmer.com, and click on Rate Show. Well, that's all for now, but I'll see you in the next episode of The Dave Palmer Show.
Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.